Good morning. Our learning objective today is to plan a non-narrative report. So when we talk about something being non-narrative, that just means that it's not a story. We're writing a report instead. Our success criteria are to decide what to include, to make language choices, and to create quotes. Before we start, let's hear the next part of the story.
Beowulf at once let loose an arrow, the iron tip striking home to its mark, deep in the sea serpent's throat. Other spears then rained down until the body of this wave lurker was dragged lifeless to the shore. Grisly, grim and gruesome. No one word could describe this ghoul of the deep. Everyone there was happy to see he was dead, I can tell you. But others were there, skulking shadows of the deep, waiting for Beowulf, waiting for their moment to strike. Beowulf now made himself ready for the fight that lay ahead of him, putting on first his heavily mailed shirt, so strong that no enemy could pierce it. On his head he set a splendid silver helmet that would protect him and ward off the worst of the blows. Wonderfully crafted it was, adorned with gold, richly carved all around with wild boars at bay. No sword swipe had ever breached its stern defence. Unferth, Hrothgar's herald and counsellor, then handed him a hilted sword. Hrunting he called it, a sword unlike any other, ancient, tried and tested. Wave-patterned, iron-edged, imbued over the years with the blood and venom of those it had destroyed. This sword had never failed any hero before. Beowulf clutched it keenly, eager now to face the foe. But first he spoke to the silver-haired Hrothgar close beside him. "The time has come, great king, to test again my courage and my strength. Remember, wise lord, all that we agreed before the fight with Grendel, that should I die in your service, you will be like a father to me when I am gone, protecting my hearth companions and sending what gifts you have granted to me, kind Hrothgar, to my lord Hygelac, for his safekeeping. Being his servant, you will understand that all I have is his. It will show him how generous you have been and how you kept your word, and he will love you for it. And let Unferth have back Hrunting, the blade he just gave me. It should rightly be his again. With Hrunting I shall kill the ogres, or die in the attempt. Let God choose between us." With these words, Beowulf, that daring prince, dived into the lake and disappeared. So deep was the perilous pool that it seemed to take forever before he saw the bottom and felt it with his feet. And there, that blood-greedy hag of the deep was waiting for him, ready in ambush. She sprang on him, fastening him at once with her hellish hooks. But although he was caught, Beowulf was so far unharmed, for her clenched claws could not pierce the mail shirt and draw blood. Pinioned and helpless in her grasp, the sea hag dragged the prince to her cavernous lair. Try as he did, Beowulf could not even draw his sword to defend himself against this water wolf, nor against the onslaught of twisting sea monsters now slashing at him with their tearing tusks that threatened to rip away his life-saving battle coat. Still held fast in her deadly embrace, Beowulf found himself hauled to the surface in a vaulted cavern, lit all about with fires of hell it seemed, but at least he could breathe again, and was free of the pressing weight of water. At least now he would not simply be swept away and drowned. Then he looked up, and saw the monstrous size of this hideous sea hag. He had felt her strength already. Undaunted, he saw his chance. He broke free of her, tore himself away, drew Hrunting, circled it high above him and brought it screaming down on her head. Sure, it must be her death stroke. But Hrunting, that battle-hardened, all-powerful sword that had sliced so easily through helmet and mail, could not bite this monster's hoary hide, but simply bounced off, leaving her flesh unharmed, unscathed, unmarked even. Never before had Hrunting failed a warrior in a fight as it had now. But Beowulf, intent on victory, was not in the least downhearted. Rather, his courage was renewed, his ferocity sharpened. Seeing its blade edge would be useless, the hero flung Hrunting aside, and trusted now, as he had before, to his own strength, to the God-given power in his hands. Now was not the moment to think of saving his life. Now would be his time of testing, his achieving of everlasting glory. Anger steeled his strength. Fury fired his determination, stirred him into action. Beowulf hurled himself at Grendel's mother, grabbed her by the shoulder and threw her bodily to the ground. But in a moment she repaid him, fully grasping him with her horrible hand-hooks, so that now he stumbled and fell, too weary now to save himself. At once she was astride him. He was at her mercy. She snatched up her dagger. Now she would avenge her boy, her only son. With a scream of triumph she struck, but the mail shirt shielded him from the sharp-edged blade, from the deadly point. Again and again she stabbed and slashed. But Beowulf's blessed battle shirt did not fail him. Without it, the Geat hero would certainly have been slaughtered there and then. But God, looking down, saved him, gave him the victory. Summoning the last of his strength, Beowulf threw her off and leapt to his feet. And there above him, on the wall, he saw hanging an ancient war trophy, a giant sword, so huge, so heavy that only a giant could wield it in battle play. But this death-defying champion, this Geatish hero, was boiling with war fury. Like this, he was as strong as any giant, and he knew it. He sprung to the wall, caught up the sword by its hilt, and whirling it once above his head, the blade singing out its death song, he brought it down on her neck in one blow, cutting clear through bone and flesh. Her death agony was swift, and when it was done she lay at his feet, stilled by death, Beowulf's giant sword hot with her fiendish blood. It was over. It was done. The monster mother was united in death at last with her monster son. Looking about him now in that hellhole, Beowulf saw scattered there the wretched remains of Hrothgar's brave hearth companions, those that Grendel had murdered as they slept in Heorot Hall. He saw too where Grendel himself lay, stiff in death, his lifeblood long ago drained from him. There was one more task for this giant sword. Beowulf, the fiercest of champions, finished the task and severed Grendel's hideous head with a single swipe.
Think of 5 things that have happened in the story so far. Make a note of them in your book whilst pausing the video. Here are my 5 things. Firstly, Hrothgar built a hall where they had a feast, but Grendel attacked. Next, Beowulf decided to go and help King Hrothgar. Thirdly, Beowulf killed Grendel and they had a feast. Next, Grendel's mother came for revenge, so Hrothgar and Beowulf went to fight her. And finally, Beowulf killed Grendel's mother and chopped off dead Grendel's head. Today, you're going to start to plan your newspaper reports. You'll be writing about Beowulf's fight against Grendel. You're imagining the newspaper came out after the fight. Remember, this newspaper, we should imagine, came out the next day. So it's not something that happened a long time ago. It's something that happened very recently. Let's listen again to the part of the story about the fight.
Grendel, Hansio was just the beginning, he thought. Onto his next victim he pounced at once, reaching out to grab him with his killing claws. But now he was met with a grip of steel, a grip harder, tighter than he had ever known, that seized him, held him fast by the arm. Locked in the vice of this grip, he could not break free, however much he struggled, and he knew at once he had met his match. Filled with sudden fear, the monster struggled again and again to loose this fist, yearning only now to be away from Heorot and home again in the safety of his lair. Vainly he tried to pull away, but Beowulf's fingers fastened harder still in an ever-tightening grip around that callous killer's arm. How Grendel longed to get out, to escape to the forests and fens, but no power on earth could force Beowulf to release his grip. Now Grendel knew, this merciless, murderous ogre, that he should never have come this night, that his death was coming, and that, despite all his efforts to tear himself away, there was nothing he could do to prevent it, no way he could save himself. Fear of this death drove him mad with anger, and anger only made him stronger. He would fight to the death to save himself. He would never give in. It was amazing that the great hall of Heorot was not split asunder that night. So ferocious was the wrestling between these two giants. Locked together in this deadly embrace, they reeled and writhed about the mead hall, so that all the Danes outside could hear a dreadful cacophony of crashing and crying resounding through Heorot. Gold-work trappings and iron braces, all well made and sturdy, simply snapped and buckled as the two of them, in deadly earnest, wrestled and grappled and struggled with each other. There was no ground given in this terrible fight, nor any mercy either. So they fought on, this Grendel, now fear-soaked, his strength failing him, and brave Beowulf, fist still clenched around the monster's arm, and knowing he had only to cling on and not let go, to banish to hell forever the damned one, God's and his own worst enemy. Clearly outside they heard the monster's demon scream, his hideous howling screech. The sound of it chilled every listener to the bone, and yet hope gladdened them too. For these they knew were not human cries, but rather the strident sobbing of the beast in agony and terror. Seeing Grendel thus pinioned by the Geatish hero, and tortured and weakened by his pain, Beowulf's companions in arms drew their swords and sprang now to his side to help him fight, to finish, if they could, this murderer's wretched life. They were not to know, Beowulf's battle friends, that no man-made sword, no steel could pierce this cruel creature's enchanted hide. Only naked strength could end his unnatural life. Grendel understood this, and he knew he was weakening, that his end must be near. He could think of no possible way to escape. Great-hearted Beowulf, sensing his sagging strength, had him still by the arm, now twisted it and turned it until the shoulder muscles split apart, the tendons snapped, the bone joints burst, and Grendel's arm was ripped and wrenched, bleeding from his body. Then Grendel fled, armless and half dead already from Heorot. Over the moors he staggered and stumbled, through the fens back to his den, knowing all the while that this was his last day on earth, that his life's blood was draining from him, he was dying his death. So Beowulf the Good had triumphed in his bitter fight with Grendel the Evil One. Thus were all Danish hopes fulfilled, and Beowulf's promise to them too. He had destroyed the great destroyer with his bare hands, saved Hrothgar's royal mead house and the Danish people from further terrors, and given them back the sanctuary of their hearth and home. So that everyone should know that their tyrant was truly dead, and their grief finally at an end, the hero hung high in the gables of Heorot, where all could see it and marvel at it too, that whole torn off limb, shoulder, arm and hand, gruesome witness to the monster's violent end.
Think of 5 things that happened in this part of the story. This is the information you're going to need in order to write your report. Make a note of them in your book whilst pausing the video. Here are my 5 things. Firstly, Grendel rips open the heavy doors of Heorot. Secondly, he kills and eats Hansio. Thirdly, Grendel attacks Beowulf and Beowulf grabs Grendel's arm. Then they fight for a long time, smashing things up. Finally, Beowulf tears off Grendel's arm and Grendel walks off to die. This is what you'll be reporting on in your newspaper reports. Make a note if you missed any of these points, and perhaps think of anything additional you could add in. What are the features of a newspaper report? Think back to yesterday's lesson. What did we label on our diagrams? The headline, the byline. So, going back a minute, the headline is the part that tells you all what the story is about. The byline is the line that tells you who wrote it. You can use your own name or you can make up an Anglo-Saxon name. Stand first. This is a short paragraph that summarises what is going to be in the story. Past tense. Remember, everything that happened in the past. Not the long ago past, but the recent past. Third person. You're writing in the third person. Do not use I in your writing. Paragraphs. Like I always say, we always use paragraphs. Picture. You might need a picture to show what happened, and a caption to show what the picture is of. One feature we often see in newspapers is quotes. Quotes tell us what someone who was there, an eyewitness, saw or heard. We write them using the same rules as direct speech. Let's look at some examples. "I couldn't believe it," said Sven, 54, an eyewitness. "We all thought that Beowulf would be killed." "I think Grendel got what he deserved," explained Beowulf, 29. "Now his reign of terror is over." Notice how newspapers often put the age of the person in brackets after their name. I'm not really sure why they do that, but if we include it in our newspaper stories, it makes them look more authentic. Don't worry that we don't know the actual age of the characters. You can make them up. In your books, I want you to write at least 3 quotes that you are going to use in your report. Remember to include inverted commas and tell the reader who is speaking. Think about who the reporter would talk to. Someone who was listening outside? Hrothgar? Beowulf? One of Beowulf's warriors? There would have been a lot of people around who the reporter could speak to. So, write those 3 quotes and then we can use them when we write our final reports.